I'm Tanya Notarios, and my position is in South Africa, professor of Hebrew at the University of the Free State, and also here I'm the head of Near Eastern Languages programs. Today we're delighted to welcome Dr. Yigal Bloch, curator of Assyriology at the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem, who will be giving a lecture on divination and prophecy in ancient Mesopotamia. But before I hand the floor over to Yigal, I would like to take a few minutes to share with you some exciting news about something happening at Polis this academic year, in which Yigal is also involved. Recently published is Polis' new contribution, new textbook, which is called 1, 2, 3, or in Akkadian Ishtan Shina Shalash, Visual and Sequential Spoken Akkadian. The founders of this project are Professor Christoph Rico of the Polis Institute and Professor Wayne Horowitz, who unfortunately could not join us today, a distinguished Assyriologist from the Hebrew University. They shared a dream of launching an innovative method for teaching the Akkadian language using modern second language acquisition methods aimed at living language practices. Those who brought this project to life and joined forces with Christoph to write the book are with us today. First of all, let me introduce Dr. Jan Safford, who recently accomplished his PhD degree at the Hebrew University, which was already accepted for publication under a very intriguing title, Lost Tribes of Israel, Israelites in Assyrian Sources, and is currently a postdoctorate at the Wayne Horowitz project at the Hebrew University, and also Asterios Kachagias here. I know he is online because we are streaming the event online, so hopefully he can hear me. He is currently a postdoctorate researcher at the Faculty of Philosophy at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. And he is actually alumnus of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he studied several ancient languages, including Sumerian and Akkadian. And our guest, Dr. Yigal Bloch, and also Dr. Hannes Leonard Hartz, who is perhaps also online, at least he was invited, of the University of Leipzig. They served as scientific consultants of the project. All this is in order to make you believe that this is a very serious project produced by a very serious team. And this year, in the second semester, Polis will be launching a pilot online course for introductory Akkadian in the Polis method that will be taught by Dr. Yigal Bloch. And everyone is welcome to join. The course will be online. You can browse this book and other Polis press publications at the stand outside the room, and if you want to purchase, that's in the office. So without further ado, let me introduce our lecturer. Dr. Yigal Bloch obtained a doctorate in Assyriology and Ancient Jewish History from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in 2013. Since then, he has published 3 books and several dozen articles on Assyriology, biblical studies, history of ancient Mesopotamia and Israel, and since 2017, he has been working as a curator at the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem. The lecture is about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answers, and then refreshment outside. Please enjoy. Yes, please.
Thank you, Tanya. So, good morning, everyone. As Tanya said, my topic is divination and prophecy in ancient Mesopotamia. When I thought about the model for this lecture, actually came up with not 1 but 2. The first attributed to Lawrence Peter Berra, better known as Yogi Berra, the American baseball player and coach, who is more famous for not his sport achievements, but for his aphorisms, yogisms as they're called. So one of them is, sometimes one can observe a lot by just watching. And the other is alternately attributed to either Yogi Berra or the physicist Niels Bohr. It's hard to predict, especially in the future. So, although it's hard, each human civilization develops its own ways to try to predict the future. And in pre-modern civilizations, predictions of this kind normally required some form of communication with the divine. what is unique about ancient Mesopotamia is that it is the earliest civilization from which written evidence of such prediction techniques has survived. One of those techniques involved direct communication from deities, that is prophecy, but it was actually relatively marginal, and more common techniques belong to the sphere of divination, namely interpretation of various phenomena that ancient Mesopotamians saw around them, so observed by just watching. And those phenomena were considered as signs given by the gods to indicate what was to happen. So when we're talking about ancient Mesopotamia, where are we geographically? Properly Mesopotamia, that which is between the rivers, is of course the valley between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern Iraq and eastern Syria. But Mesopotamian culture, with its cuneiform writing and the Sumerian and Akkadian languages, influenced a lot of lands around, from Elam in southwestern Iran to Syria and Canaan in the Levant. And so we can speak actually about the entire Fertile Crescent shown here on this map in green as the area influenced by Mesopotamian culture. When do we begin to find divination and divination specialists? The earliest records appear in the list of professions in Sumerian from the sites of Tel el-Farah and Tel Abu Salabih in southern Mesopotamia and from Ebla in northern Syria in the mid-3rd millennium BCE. As you can see an example here, it's just a long list of various professions arranged in several columns. And one of those professions is in Sumerian Lu Mash Shu Gid, which means literally one who extends his hand to a god. From later texts which translate Sumerian terms into Akkadian, the Semitic language of Mesopotamia, we know that this term corresponds to Akkadian Baru, which is a haruspect, namely a professional whose activity was telling the future based on signs in the liver of a sacrificed animal. Yet in those later periods, the animal involved was a sheep and not a god, despite longer. So how can one use a sheep liver to foretell the future? Well, each part of a liver had a name in both Sumerian and Akkadian, and cuneiform tablets containing predictions of events based on specific appearances of those parts of liver are known from the early 2nd to the mid and late 1st millennium BCE. So we have here a diagram from the book by Ulla Koch-Westnholz, Babylonian liver omens. It has the ventral lobe forward, so we're looking at it from the back. Different parts of the liver had names which are given here in Akkadian, like Manzazu, the presence, Padanu, the path, Putabu, the pleasing word, and so on. They also Sumerian counterparts. Now, how was the prediction structured? Well, we have an example here, a fragment which is known from cuneiform tablets of the late 2nd millennium BCE. The manuscripts are actually coming from diverse locations, so Ashur in northern Mesopotamia, Kish in southern Mesopotamia, and Emer in northern Syria. And again from Ulla Koch-Westnholz's book, and the text goes like this: if the presence, the part which we saw earlier, if the presence is contracted for warfare, wailing will fall upon the army. If the presence is contracted and turns into a weapon, the days of the prince will come to an end. If the presence is contracted and turns into a request, the city will be seized. If the presence is contracted and turns into a request and is dark, the city will be seized and its army, something will happen to it, but the text is broken. So we can see, first of all, that each prediction is structured as a conditional sentence with protasis and apodosis, the if-then structure. And the protasis proceeds in the increasing order of sophistication. So basic condition, if the presence is contracted, then if the presence is contracted and something else, and it goes on and on. Well, how do we know what names were given to each part of the liver? This information comes from clay models of sheep with cuneiform inscriptions. Some of them, like the one we see here on the right, has only the apodosis. So it's a liver model, and the prediction of some future event is recorded on the part of a liver which is related to it. This example comes from the city of Mari. Other models, like the one we see here on the left from the city of Sippar, are more detailed. It has the entire predictions written on them, including the name of the liver part, and that's how those names are actually known. Two models of this kind have been discovered in Canaan in Tel Hatzor, which shows the extent of the influence of cuneiform culture in this land. These models date to the early second millennium BCE, pretty small, but the information is there, and they are of the type that only records the apodictis. So we have them here from Wayne Horowitz's book, from Canaan. A king will subjugate a king, an enemy will rise against my land, joyful or sinful. It's debated reading there, something of a god on earth, Isha will devour the land, and so on. So if there are signs in the sheep liver, how do they get there? An answer to it from Mesopotamian viewpoint is given in a text known as Prayer to the Gods of Night, again from the early 2nd millennium BCE, edited several times, but most recently by Wayne Horowitz in 2000. Text in Akkadian, in English translation, reads like this: the princes are closely guarded, the bolts are lowered, rings set in place, the noisy people are silenced, gates once opened are locked. The gods of the land, goddesses of the land, Shamash, Sin, Adad, and Ishtar have gone off into the lap of heaven. They are not giving judgment, they are not deciding cases. Veiled is the night. The palace, its chapel and sanctum are dark. The wayfarer calls out to his God. The petitioner is fast asleep. The judge of truth, father of the destitute, Shamash, has gone into his cell. So it's night, all the gods have gone away to rest. Shamash, the son who is responsible for both justice and divination, is gone into his cellar, but something still happens. All great gods of the night, brilliant, Gira, heroic, Hera, bow, yoke, Orion, dragon, wagon, she-god, bison, horned serpent, stand by in the ecstasis, tertum in Akkadian, which I am performing, in the lamb which I am offering, plays through. So, in this text, we have the gods of the night identified with various constellations, placing signs of the future in the sheep's liver at night, before the sheep will be sacrificed in the morning. A 1,000 years later, we find a somewhat different picture. We find it in where is addressed to the sun god Shamash in the prayers of Assyrian haruspices of the 7th century BCE. There's several dozen queries of this kind published in State Archives of Assyria, Volume 4 by Ivan Starr. The specific example I chose is text number 20 from that volume, which concerns Esarhaddon and the Partatua, king of the Scythians, to whom Esarhaddon contemplated giving his daughter in marriage. But the Scythians in Akkadian are Ashkuza, and the Hebrew Ashkenaz comes from there. The text goes: this Shamash, great Lord, give me a firm positive answer to what I'm asking. Partatua, king of the Scythians, who has now sent his messenger to Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, concerning a royal daughter in marriage. If Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, gives him a royal daughter in marriage, will Partatua, king of the Scythians, speak with Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, in good faith, true and honest words of peace? Will he give the treaty of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria? Will he do whatever is pleasing to Esarhaddon, king of Assyria? Is it decreed and confirmed in a favorable case by the command of your great divinity, Shamash, great Lord? Will he who can see? Will he who can hear? So here is a situation: diplomatic marriage is proposed, which should be accompanied by a treaty, and the question is whether the other side will keep the treaty. Now, it is an ecstasis query. Ecstasis should be performed in certain conditions. The person performing it must be pure. The place where it is performed must be pure. The sheep must be unblemished, etc., etc. But things happen, and so the next thing the haruspix does is asking God to ignore any mistake if it is made in the process, disregard the formulation of today's case, be it good, be it faulty, disregard that an unclean man or woman has come near the place of the ecstasis and made it unclean, disregard that the ram offered to your divinity for the performance of ecstasis is deficient or faulty, and then comes an address, direct address to the sun god. Be present in this realm, place in it a firm positive answer, favorable designs, favorable propitious omens, by the oracular command of your great divinity, and may I see them. So, as in the previous case, there is a divinity placing the signs of the future in the liver of the sheep, but now it is the sun god himself and not the gods of the night. The prediction of the future based on the signs in the Sheep River were collected in a tablet series known as Barutu, Art of the Haruspex. The series has not been completely preserved, but its most extensive manuscripts belong to the Nineveh library of Ashurbanipal, who was Esarhaddon's son and successor. At that time, the series contained about 100 tablets and around 8,000 lines in total. Indeed, under Esarhaddon Ashurbanipal, the Barutu series underwent a kind of canonization. The Assyrian kings took an active part in this process, as evident, for example, from a letter sent by Marduk Shumi Utsur, the chief Haruspex of the Assyrian court, and by his colleagues, to either Esarhaddon or Ashurbanipal. That's State Archive of Assyria, Volume 10, text 177. So, to the king, our lord, the servants Marduk Shumi Utsur, Natsiru, and Tabni, help to the king, our lord. May Ashur, Shamash, Bel, and Nabu bless the king, our lord. Is broken. The series should be revised. Let the king command 2 long tablets containing explanations of antiquated words should be removed, and 2 tablets of the Haruspias corpus should be put instead. 2 rams should be sacrificed before Nabu and before Shamash. Shamash and Nabu will do something, text broken, but maybe bless the king and so on. So the Haruspias scholars came to the conclusion that the series must be revised, but they still needed the king's authorization to do so. And indeed, they needed the king's authorization also to practice their craft on a daily basis, as we see from another letter from the same volume. To the king, our lord, your servants Marduk, Shumu, Utsur, Natsiro, and Akaraya, may the and Marduk bless the king, our lord. We have rights to perform in the chaos of the kind of movable sanctuary. Let the king, our lord, give an order to Sassi that they should let us go. Nobody will release us, and we cannot go out. Again, the Haruspices need to move to a sanctuary outside the city to perform their craft, and some officers was preventing them from going out. They complained to the king that a permission should be given to them. So how did one get the job of an Haruspex at the Assyrian court? We see an example of this in a letter of Tabni to Ashurbanipal, when Ashurbanipal was still the crown prince, so in the late reign of Esarhaddon. To the crown prince, my lord, your servant Tabni, would help to the crown prince, my lord. May Nabu and Marduk bless the crown prince, my lord. From his childhood to his maturity, my father took care of the father of the crown prince. Steadily he stood in his presence, he shared the food apparently of his basket with the king, his lord. He experienced the days of misfortune with the king, his lord. The king, our lord, apparently showed him kindness, he dressed him in purple, and appointed him the chief Haruspex. Among the servants of the king and the elders of the palace, something is broken there, and then so he named the king, said, my servant has walked forward after me. Let me do my servant a favor. The first token of my favor is I will assign to him the leadership of scholars. My second favor is, as long as he's in Assyria, let him be near me. Furthermore, he said, if I didn't do him a favor, would it be appropriate in the sight of the gods? So he did him the same favor, and myself, as part of the favor shown to my father, he gave to the crown prince, my lord. And the crown prince, my lord, drew up a contract entitling me to have usufruct of the leftovers of the crown prince, my lord. Now, what have I done wrong in the eyes of the crown prince, my lord? So, he was appointed as a Haruspex to the crown prince, but then something bad happened. What happened? You can see in the continuation, one Haruspex is enjoying the leftovers. But have I really been all that happy since they withheld my something? And now the crown prince, my lord, had added to my misery by dressing another Haruspex in purple robes. As for my heart, the crown prince, my lord, has broken. Moreover, whereas Aplaya and Natsir have kept in their hands non-canonical tablets and something else of every possible kind, I have robbed my craft from my own father. Now, let the crown prince put his servant to a test. I am an expert in explicit tablets, writing of reports, and things beyond. The crown prince, my lord, may treat his servant as he deems best. But why did the crown prince, my lord, thus break my heart? So, in order to be employed as a court Haruspex, one needed to be a scion of a scholarly family and to possess knowledge of his own. Yet, royal favor was also necessary. Interestingly, we saw a letter, SA 10-177, in which Tabni appears among the court Haruspices, so apparently was admitted again to the court, but in contrast to his father, whose name we don't know, Tabni never succeeded in becoming the chief Haruspex. Now, insofar as the Haruspices were employed by the kings, they had to deliver prediction to the kings, and the predictions should better be good, favorable. And we have an example of this in a letter of, again, the chief Harospax Marduk Shumu also, this time to Ashurbanipal, when Ashurbanipal set out on one of his campaigns of conquest. It goes like this: to the king, lord of kings, my lord, and Ashur, the highest god, who by his holy and unchangeable command has ordered 1,000 years of life for the king, my lord, your servant Marduk Shumu. May the gods here in Shamash attend to the health of the king, my lord. May Nabu and Marduk give name and seed to the king, my lord. May the lady of Nineveh and Ishtar of Arbela guide you like a mother and a sister. The god Ashur, in a dream, called the grandfather of the king, my lord, a sage. The king, lord of kings, is an offspring of a sage in Adar, a famous antediluvian Mesopotamian sage. You have surpassed the wisdom of the abyss and all scholarship. When the father of the king, my lord, went to Egypt, a temple of cedar was built outside the city of Haran. He was sitting upon a staff with 2 crowns on his head, and the god Nusku stood before him. The father of the king, my lord, entered. He placed the crowns on his head, and it was said to him, you will go and conquer the world with it. So he went and conquered Egypt. The king, lord of kings, will conquer the rest of the countries, which have not submitted to Ashur and sin. May the god Ashur, Sin, Shamash, Adad, Belen, Nabu, Ninurta, Nergal, and Nusku, Ishtar of Nineveh, and Ishtar of Arbela, give an everlasting throne, a long reign, a piece of prosperity, etc., etc. So a very flattering letter, which begins after the blessings and all that, begins with the grandfather of the king being called a sage. Now, the grandfather of Ashurbanipal was Sennacherib, who was renowned for many things, but not specifically for his wisdom. Still, it doesn't hurt to flatter the king. And then, of course, it talks about the father of Ashurbanipal, named Esarhaddon, who went to Egypt and was given a sign from the god that he will conquer, which he eventually did. Okay, so that was about extinctions. And now another very common technique of predicting the future in ancient Mesopotamia was astrology, namely observation of various heavenly bodies and their configurations. The earliest mention of heavenly bodies as a sign determining the future appeared in the so-called twin cylinders, similar to the description of Gudea, the ruler of the city of Lagash on the lower Tigris in the late 22nd century BCE. You can see here the cylinders as they are on display in the Louvre. Now, why 2 cylinders? Very simple, because one was not enough. It is the longest Sumerian text, which consists of about 2,000 lines. So, they needed 2 cylinders to record it. The entire inscription deals with Gudea's reconstruction of the temple Enlil to the god Girsu in the city of Girsu, the religious center of the kingdom of Lagash. And it begins with a dream which Gudea saw and which actually commanded him to reconstruct the temple. So, it's part of the description of the dream which you have here on the screen. There was someone in my dream, enormous as the skies, enormous as the earth was he. That one was a god as regards his head. He was the thunderbird as regards his wings, and the flatstone as regards his lower body. There was a lion lying on both his left and right side. He told me his house should be built, but I did not understand what exactly he intended. Daylight rose from me on the horizon. Then there was a woman, whoever she might be, coming forward with sheaves. She had in her hand a stylus of shining metal. On her knees there was a tablet with heavenly stars, and she was consulting it. So that's the dream. Gudea, to understand that, Gudea turned to the goddess Nansha in the Sirara temple in the city of Yigal, and the goddess interpreted the dream for him. And the one who you said was as enormous as the skies, enormous as the earth, who was a god as regards his head, who, as you said, was a thunderbird as regards his wings, and who, as you said, was a flatstone as regards his lower parts, at whose left and right a lion was lying. He was in fact my brother, the god Girsu. He talked to me about the building of his shrine, Enlil. The daylight that had arisen for you on the horizon, that was your personal god Girsu. Like daylight, you will be able to rise for you from there. The young woman coming forward with sheaves, who was holding a stylus of shining metal, had on her knees a tablet with stars, which she was consulting. She was in fact my sister Nisaba. She announced to the bright star auguring the building of the house. Star predicting actually commanded the temple should be built. Later, the concept of heavenly body with eternal divine writing determining the course of events is attested in royal inscriptions from both Assyria and Babylonia. We have a couple of examples here, one of them from a land grant to the district governor of Borsippa by Marduk Laidina the first, a Kesite, king of Babylonia in the 12th century BCE, details the grant and then spells out its purpose for him, the governor, to gladden the heart of his lord Marduk Laidina, to take anxious care of it daily, to be fearfully occupied with it monthly, and to pursue that task yearly without ceasing. To make it ever greater, to carry it out according to the plan as the writing of heaven, Shikir Shamain Akkadian, he named the king, granted it to him forever. Another inscription, another example appears in the cylinder of Sennacherib, or Assyria, which describes his first campaign to Babylonia and the foundation of his new palace in Nineveh. At that time, Nineveh, the exalted cult center, the city loved by the goddess Ishtar, in which all the rituals for gods and goddesses are present. The enduring foundation and eternal base whose plan had been designed by the writing of the firmament, Shikir Burumet, and whose arrangement was made manifest since time immemorial, and so on and so forth. But we have here this idea of the writing of the heaven of the firmament, establishing the course of future events. Now, the direct predictions of the future based on configurations of heavenly bodies are known since the early second millennium BCE. As for example, this tablet from southern Mesopotamia, again edited by Wayne Horowitz. So, if the heavens are troubled, this year is unlucky. If the heaven, its face shines like moonlight, and there is a rumble, noise, this year is lucky. If the face of heaven shines like moonlight until the disappearance of the moon, the north wind will blow, there will be grain. Even the heavens, the god, namely the moon, on the day of disappearance, does not promptly disappear. At the end of the month, a drought will take place in the land, and so on. Importantly, the appearance of the heavenly bodies do not depend on human action. Thus, astrological divination is non-inductive, in contrast to inductive forms of divination that are initiated by human action, such as sacrificing a sheep. And to a large extent, astrological divination in Mesopotamia was based on lunar eclipses. And perhaps due to the fact that lunar eclipses are unusual, they don't happen that often, but still frequent enough to build a body of predictions on them. An example of a list of predictions based on lunar eclipses can be seen here in this tablet from the city of Mari in eastern Syria of the 18th century BC. It goes like this: if an eclipse takes place in the months of Sivan, the land will have a protective giving, blood will occur in the room. If an eclipse takes place in the months of Tammuz, there will be famine in the land. A king of renown will do something that's broken, the city's inhabitants will flee. If an eclipse takes place in the month of Abu, the harvest will prosper, the king's army will be sent on a successful mission, and so on. What is interesting about this tablet is that although it was found in Mari, the month names in it do not belong to the local calendar. Instead, they belong to the Nepo calendar of southern Mesopotamia, which was adopted by southern Mesopotamian kingdoms such as Isin, Larsa, and Babylon. While in the south, the cities of southern Mesopotamia were the major center of astrological knowledge. From them, this knowledge was exported everywhere else, and it included the month names, as we can see in this example. Now, in some instances, different methods of foretelling the future could be used in one and the same case for verification. We have an example in a letter sent by the diviner Askudum to Yasmach Addo, who ruled the city of Mari on behalf of his father Samsiado around 1800 BCE. And goes like this: to my lord speak, your servant Askudum says, an eclipse of Sin, the moon, occurred on the 14th day, and the occurrence of that eclipse bodes ill. I made extispices teretum for the well-being of my lord and for the well-being of the upper district. And the extispices were sound. Now, my lord must have extispices done there for his well-being and the well-being of the city of Mari. The heart of my lord need not be concerned. And my lord must send me a response to my tablet, and my heart will calm. So, an eclipse occurred, it bodes ill. Extispices on Ship River are carried out to check whether the ill indeed pertains, and happily it doesn't, but still the divine recommends the ruler of Mari to perform the same procedure in the capital city. So similarly to predictions based on extispices, the astrological predictions were also ordered in a series. This series was named after its first line, Enuma Anu, and so when the gods Anu and Enlil established the paths of heaven and so on. Its fullest version consists of around 70 tablets and is known from Ashurbanipal's library. Again, it has 4 divisions dealing with lunar phenomena, solar phenomena, weather phenomena, which also were considered to belong to the heavenly realm, and the other stars and planets beside the sun and the moon. So an example of the predictions based on lunar eclipses we have here in tablet 16 of Enuma Anu Enlil from Ashurbanipal's library. So it goes like this: if an eclipse occurs on the 14th of the Uzu and begins and clears in the south, a great king will die. If an eclipse occurs on the 14th of the Uzu and begins and clears in the north, king will be hostile to the king. If an eclipse occurs on the 14th of the Uzu and begins and clears in the east, rains and floods will be regular. If an eclipse occurs on the 14th of the Uzu and begins and clears in the west, the crops will thrive in Amuru. If an eclipse occurs on the 14th of the Uzu and the meteor falls, there will be famine in the land. So again, we have a basic condition, eclipse on day 14 of the month of the Uzu, and additional conditions like where the eclipse begins and clears, or what happens during the eclipse. We see that the additional conditions here cover all the possibilities. They had the 4 quadrants of the lunar disk, so south, north, east, west, and they cover them all. So it's an interesting question whether this was done by observation or extrapolation. Extrapolation played a role to a large extent. We can see it not from this omen, but from the fact that there are omens for lunar eclipses on dates like day 10 or day 20 of the lunar month. So an eclipse in the middle of the month, on day 14, the lunar eclipse in the middle of the lunar month is where it should occur, when it should occur. But a lunar eclipse on day 10 or day 12 or day 20 is impossible astronomically. But still we have such omens because apparently the scribes wanted to cover all the possibilities, and it was a matter of theoretical thinking what would happen if an eclipse occurs on that date. The scholars who specialize in astrological predictions were called Tupshar, the scribe of Enuma Anu Enlil. And as with the specialists in astrology, their tasks included not only directly foretelling the future, but also collecting earlier tablets with astrological prediction and canonizing those tablets into a series. An example can be found in the report of the astrologer Shumaya to a Saharan or a Ashurbanipal, SAA, State Archives of Assyria, Volume 8, text 499, which you can see here. If the moon does not wait for the sun but sets, raging of lion and wolf, explanation: on the 15th day it is seen with the sun. In the monthly sun of the moon will complete the day. On the 14th day, the moon will be seen with the sun. So there is an omen, an explanation what it means, and result of it for the next month. And then another matter is really concerning the box writing boards, Leo, and the clay tablets, Tupu, of the series Enuma Anu Enlil, about which I spoke to the king in Ur. Let the king be informed from Shumaya, astrologer of the new cohort. This Shumaya, as we can see from the mention of both the new cohort and the city of Ur, was apparently a Babylonian astrologer from that city who was joined on the orders of the Assyrian king to the astrologers in his service. And he transmitted to the king some information about another text to be included in the Enuma Anu Enlil Omen series. Now, if the omens predict something bad, how can one protect himself? For this purpose, the ancient Mesopotamians practiced a ritual called Namburbi, literally dispersal of evil in Sumerian. We can see a mention of this ritual in a report of the astrologer Palasi to Ashurbanipal, dated to the spring of 668 BCE, soon after Ashurbanipal's enthronement. It goes like this: if the moon becomes late at an appropriate time and does not become visible, attack our ruling city. That's all an explanation. It sets on the 15th day and is seen with the sun on the 16th day, a day or two later than it should. If Mars keeps going around the planet, bargain will become expensive. If the red star reaches the path of the sun, business will diminish, variant there will be clamor. These are words concerning Akkad, Babylonia. Mars remains 4 fingers distant from Sun. It did not come close, did not reach it. I have nevertheless copied the relevant omen. What does it matter? Let the pertinent Nambur ritual be performed. So the bad omen did not occur quite as recorded in the source used by the scholar, and in any event, Even if had occurred properly, it would pertain to Babylonia and not to Assyria, where Shobani ruled, but still Balassi advised the king to perform an Amburbi ritual and just in case. Of course, when there is a ritual to dispel a bad prediction, this raises the question of if the prediction is established by the gods, if it is preordained, how do the humans have choice to avert the evil? The Assyrian astrologers dealt with this problem, as we can see in a letter from the same Balassi to either Esarhaddon or Ashurbanipal. The king, my lord, your servant Balassi, good health to the king, my lord. May the god Nabu and Marduk bless the king, my lord, concerning the interpretation of the Omen, about which the king, my lord, wrote to me. It is said that the king will be vilified among his magnates. What losses will ensue? Interpretations of monthly omens are like this. One is never similar to another. The interpretations go separately. Now this one. If you will be slighted, its explanation can only be the earthquake. The earth has indeed quaked. That is bad. They should perform the ritual against the earthquake. Your gods will then make the evil pass by. The ritual's title is The God Air has done, the God Air has undone. He who caused the earthquake has also created the appropriate ritual against it. Was there no earthquake at the time of the king's fathers and grandfathers? Did they not see earthquakes when I was small? The god is only wanted to open the king's ears. He should pray to the god, perform the appropriate ritual, and be on his guard. The omen here is about an earthquake and not an astral phenomenon, but the same principle as it were. The gods created an omen, and they also created a ritual for the humans to forestall its bad consequences. Now, how was lunar eclipses interpreted? We saw a bit about this before, so the interpretation depended on the precise date, month, day, and the time of night, and also on the part of the moon, which was covered by the shadow, and on the shadow's direction of movement. And we can see this on the diagram from Simo Parpola's book, Letters from Assyrian Scholars to the Kings Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. Each quadrant of the moon was related to a specific land in Mesopotamian terms, specific cardinal direction, and when the eclipse covered that part, there was something related to that cardinal direction. Actually, these drawings are based on a report of the astrologer Minabi to the king, which is also published in the State Archives of Assyria in 8. Of course, with time, observation of the heavenly bodies led to the discovery of the cyclical nature of the movement in the sky. And perhaps the most important of the cycles thus discovered was the Saros, Sharon Sumerian, a cycle of possible eclipses of the sun and the moon lasting 223 synodic lunar months. Now, importantly, is the cycle of possible eclipses. In practice, because of the changing configurations of the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon, not all of them could be observed in Mesopotamia. There was an interesting example of this in a Babylonian tablet from the city of Uruk, dated to year 8 of Cyrus the Great, so 531 BCE. And the tablet begins with 12 lines of personal names, and then the text goes on. This is the assembly of the royal delegates and the notables, before whom King Marduk, son of Nabushul, the king descendant of Eker, Arad Bunene, son of Ginilu, descendant of Kuduranu, and Nabu Kapki Ilani, son of Inakibibel, descendant of Ekashri, declared as follows. On the 13th day of the month Siman, in the 8th year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, king of the lands, after sunset, the Kalu priest of the Ebabar temple played the copper cathedral at the gate of the Ebabar, and declared as follows, eclipse, and all the inhabitants of Larsa saw with us the plane of the copper cathedral. So, was there indeed an eclipse? Well, the Uruk tablet gives the precise date of writing, day 13 of Siman, year 8 of Cyrus, and this corresponds to the Julian date of June 15, 531 BC. On that day, there was indeed a lunar eclipse, but it was penumbra, namely an eclipse in which only part of the lunar disk moves through the outer circle of the shadow cast by the Earth. In such an eclipse, only a slight darkening of part of the lunar disk can be seen, not the disappearance of any part of it or all of it. And moreover, even this phenomenon could be observed on that day only in the Pacific, not in Mesopotamia. So, most likely, the ritual in the Babar temple of the city of Lhasa, around 20 kilometers east of Uruk, the ritual which was mentioned in this tablet, was intended to ward off the evil portents of an expected eclipse, which they could take place on that date, but that eclipse eventually failed to materialize, and thus, insofar as the people of Larsa and Uruk were concerned, the ritual intended to ward off was effective. Now, some other phenomena were also perceived in ancient Mesopotamia as bearing signs for the future, such as the birth of humans and animals with deformities, recorded in the Omen series Shuma Izbu, various happenings of daily life. For example, if a man goes on a street and someone else carries a statue going across his way, that kind of thing recorded in the Omen series Shuma Alu, or the occurrence of different phenomena in a specific month recorded in the Omen series Ikur Ipush, and more. Actually, the prediction based on the occurrence of an earthquake, which we saw earlier, was apparently taken from the series Ikur Ipush, which speaks of an earthquake in the month of Uzu. Now, all that was about divination, what about prophecy? Well, the basic difference between prophecy and divination is that the prophet speaks the words of a deity which the audience can understand directly, in contrast to omens that must be interpreted by specialists. And while the study of omens and their interpretation was indeed a specialized field of knowledge which required many years of study, the gift of prophecy was, at least in theory, accessible to everyone. In Mesopotamia, prophecy is attested only in some historical periods, and its spread was probably more limited than that of divination. Two periods in which we have significant evidence about Mesopotamian prophecy are the Old Babylonian period in the first half of the second millennium BCE, when various Amorite West Semitic deities ruled the Mesopotamian kingdoms, and the epochs of the New Assyrian Empire, the 7th century BC, after large-scale deportations from Syria and Canaan to the Mesopotamian heartland. This suggests prophecy was originally a West Semitic phenomenon, transplanted to Mesopotamia with various migrations. We have an example of an Old Babylonian prophecy in the city of Babylon in the reign of Hammurabi, reported to Zimrilim, king of Mari, by his envoy in Babylon named Yarim Addu. It refers to Shmed Dagan, king of the Kalatum, who found refuge in Babylon. It goes like this: "Speak to my lord, thus Yarim Addu, your servant, concerning the report of Shmed Dagan's going to a Kalatum, which my lord has heard repeatedly. He no way went up to a Kalatum. It is a product of rumors about him, keeps circulating around him. A prophet of Marduk stood at the gate of the palace, proclaiming incessantly, Ishmael Dagan will not escape the hand of Marduk. That hand will tie together a sheaf and he will be caught in it." This is what he kept proclaiming at the gate of the palace. Nobody said anything to him. Directly he stood at the gate of Ishmael Dagan, proclaiming incessantly in the midst of the whole citizenry as follows: "You went to the ruler of Elam to establish peaceful relations. But when there was a peaceful relationship, you had the treasures of Marduk and the city of Babylon delivered to the ruler of Elam. You exhausted my magazines and treasures without returning my favors. And now we are going off to a Kalatum. He who dissipates my treasures must not demand from me more." As he kept proclaiming this in the midst of the whole citizenry, nobody said anything to him. So Shmed Dagan was the king of the city of Kalatum near Ashur, actually ruled over Ashur as well. He had an alliance with Hammurabi of Babylon, in the course of which some goods were sent from Babylon to him, belonging to Marduk, the god of Babylon. But then, when threatened by the ruler of Elam, Shmed Dagan tried to pay him off with those goods, but eventually had to flee from his city to Babylon because of an Elamite invasion. And now he was staying in Babylon. He wanted to go back to Kalatum, but the prophet claimed that Marduk would not allow that to happen. So that was kind of accusation to a foreign king from the viewpoint of a Babylonian prophet, but prophets could also voice direct demands of a king on a god's behalf. We see an example of this in another letter sent to Zimrilim, king of Mari, this time from his envoy in the city of Halab, Aleppo, in northern Syria, Nursim. So my lord said, "Thus Nursim, your servant, Abia, the prophet of the god Abu, the lord of Halab, came to me and spoke as follows. Thus says Abu, I had given the land, all of it, to Yahdulim. Thanks to my weapons, he had no rival. Yet he abandoned me. And the land that I had given to him, I had gave instead to Samsiadu. There was a large break afterwards. But the text deals with the history of the kingship of Mari, going from Yahdulim, an ancestor of Zimrilim, to Samsiadu, who was a foreign king, and then Zimrilim was brought back to the throne of Mari, so that I would bring you, Zimrilim, back to your land. Now I have brought you back to the throne of your father's house, and I have given you the weapon with which I fought the Sibos of Tiamat. I have anointed you with the oil of my victory, so nobody can stand before you. Now listen to my word. When someone who has a lawsuit cries out to you, I have been wronged, stand up and judge his case. Answer him in justice. This is what I demand of you. When you go out on a campaign, do not go out without an oracle. If I step forth in my oracle, you will go out on a campaign. But if it is not so, do not go out of the gate. This is what the prophet said. Now, I have sent to my lock of the prophet's hair and the hem of his garment. At the time, a lock of hair and the hem of a garment symbolically represented the person when such representation was needed. The prophet was in Halab. He could not go to marry, so instead, Zimmerlin's animal sent to marry a symbolic representation of the prophet's person. And the prophet spoke in the God's name to Zimmerlin, demanding of Zimmerlin first to do justice, and second, to perform extispecie before going out on a campaign. So we can see here that prophecy and divination did not contradict each other, but could be used together. In this case, the prophecy demands the use of divination. Now, as for the Neo-Assyrian period, the surviving prophecies from that time belonged almost entirely to court prophets, and like the court haruspices, their stand toward the king was exclusively supported. We can see an example of this in this collection of prophecies to a Sarhedon from several gods, published in State Archives of Assyria, Volume 9. Fear not a Sarhedon, I am Ben, man. Even as I speak to you, I watch over the beams of your heart. When your mother gave birth to you, 60 great gods stood with me and protected you. Sin was at your right side, Shamash at your left. 60 great gods were standing around you and guarding your loins. Second prophecy, do not trust in men. Lift up your eyes, look to me. I am Ishtar of Arbela. I reconciled Ashur with you. When you were small, I took you to me. Do not fear, praise me. Third prophecy, what enemy has attacked you while I remain silent? The future should be like the past. I am Nabu, Lord of these times. Praise me. So interestingly, all these three prophecies from three different gods were delivered by one and the same person, a prophetess, and we have it in the subscript here, by the mouth of the woman Baya, a person of the city of Arbela. So what we just saw is the kind of prophecies in the collections from the reigns of Sarhedon and Shulman. We do not see their prophecies critical of the kings, but such prophecies apparently were existent in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Traces of them can be found here and there, and one is quoted in a letter of Nabu-Reshi Ishi, priest of the goddess Ishtar of Arbela, to Sarhedon or Ashurbanipal, which is a State Archives of Assyria, volume 13, text 144. To the king, my lord, the servant Nabu-Reshi Ishi. Good health to the king, my lord. May Ashur, Ishtar, Nabu, and Marduk let the king, my lord, live 100 years. The sacrifice of the king has been performed on the 14th day, the 16th, the 18th, and the 20th. Then there's a large break. Apparently, in the text, most of the break, prophetess was mentioned. Now we still have the end of the text. She prophesied, why did you give the kind of wood, the groves, and other objects to the Egyptians? Say in the king's presence, they should be given back to me. I will then give total abundance to his reign, something else. So there was some kind of wood in the grove, which, apparently for diplomatic reasons, was given to the Egyptians. The goddess was not pleased with it, and they, through her prophetess, she demanded the king to give her the said goods back. It is a divine demand of the king. The surviving Neo-Assyrian documents do not contain a prophecy demanding the king to do justice, as we have seen with Zimmerlin, but that may be just a matter of chance survival of the African. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yigal, for this very informative talk, full of content. And we have time for questions and answers. Anyone who would like to talk, maybe come forward, because the microphone is here if we want to be heard on the in our recording. Any questions, comments? Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a question.
If you can maybe come closer. Yes. No, just stand here. Thank you.
My question is about the subject of prophecy.
Yes.
When you're comparing the prophecies between different cultures, do you see a lot of similarities about the subjects of the prophecies, or do the subjects of prophecies seem to vary depending on the culture in the ancient world?
It varies depending on the social context in which the prophets were, and the social context of and the context of the documentation which records their prophecies. Again, in Mesopotamia, for example, in the New Assyrian period, almost all the surviving prophecies are called prophecies. They will praise the king, they will promise support of the god to the king, but hardly anything more. And from hints here and there, we can see that there were other prophecies as well, more critical of the king. In the old Babylonian period, we have more sort of criticisms and demands, as we have seen, but again, the documentation comes from royal correspondence, and that was the filter which filtered the content. And what we have in the Bible, of course, we have the biblical prophets are not in the king's service. Maybe occasionally they are when Isaiah encourages Hezekiah to stand against Sennacherib, but mostly not. And there we see many more demands and criticisms of the people. A lot depends here on the context of activities and the context of documentation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. More questions from our audience here, please.
I see that there's a lot of documentation of how to foresee what's the future. But are also prophecies or divination about things that happened and has to be interpreted, like dreams, like the hand that Daniel described.
Yes, well, not
are unexpected things, and then they need to interpret it.
Not writing on the wall, but every divination is an explanation of something that happened. Dream interpretation, you need the dream to happen to interpret it. There are such things. Unexpected things, for someone looking at the stars for his life, he would probably know what to expect. But things like the Shumba Isbu omens, birth of various defective young animals or human babies, that would be kind of unexpected.
And dreams?
Yes, they did deal with interpretation of dreams. There are texts dealing with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. Annie. Thank you.
Thank you for your lecture. I have a couple of questions and maybe a small comment. In the early period, like in the empire of Sumer and Akkad, do we see differences between Sumer and Akkad? And was there one people that influenced more than others in terms of divination? Mm-hmm. And then I see that the way the predictions are made is very almost systematic and very clear. If something happens then, and this is a bit surprising to me because it's falsifiable at the end of the day, much more than, let's say, in ancient Greek oracles, which is very, you try to do something very vague, very wide. So this leads me to a question of knowing how serious were these predictions taken. Is it like today we can open the newspaper and we find, but we consider it like something amusing. Do we have texts? Do we know that, for example, the king says, my astrologer said this, so I went to war. How's the reception?
Yeah, well,
how strong was it received and how?
So the first question, the Sumerian apparently ceased to be the spoken language sometime around 2000 BCE. It was used as a literal language, language of learning, much like Latin in medieval and early modern Europe. And from before that time, we actually do not have a lot of mentions of divination. We have the star in Buddha's dream, and we have this mention of aspects in the professions list, but not really much, so it's hard to tell whether anything was different before. But from what we know, apparently not. The difference between Sumerians and Akkadians is a whole separate issue, but Mesopotamian culture became a blend of these two populations very early, and it's very hard to tell one from the other. Now, with regard to the predictions being taken seriously, not all predictions are amusing. We have predictions of where the stock market will go in a month from now, and people are losing fortunes on that. It happens. It still happens to our day. The thing about the Mesopotamian predictions, yes, they were systematic, but and they won't take it seriously. For example, Jen mentioned here that sometimes when an eclipse was judged to be to predict something ill for the king would go into hiding, and they would put a substitute king on the throne who was put there just pro forma. If the bad omen happens, it will fall on him, and if not, he would be actively killed after 100 days or something like that. So yes, but still any omen leaves room for interpretation, like we saw in this example with an Hamburg ritual where a omen happened, but not just that it should. It relates to Babylonia, and there is a question whether it is relevant to Assyria at all or not. The astrologer recommended the ritual just in case, but he would have as well refrained from doing so. And we have actually not letters by the king, but letters to the king from various horoscopes or astrologers accusing one another, like, that guy's in the ground, he doesn't know what he's talking, he cannot tell Venus from Mars, don't listen to him. Things like that. So even if something was predicted and didn't happen, it could be always blamed on the relevant incompetency of the person or some problem with the circumstances and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. And they do have online questions? No. More questions from the audience? Then maybe I will use this floor to ask my questions. This distinction between divination, which is a kind of technical art, and prophecy, which is a kind of the speech of God and produced by oracles, is of course very important and very helpful for understanding biblical prophecy as well. So the first tendency is to think that biblical prophecy is definitely not divination, but is rather this ecstatic type of prophecy when a prophet just open his or her mouth and speak in the name of God. But still, do we find any influence of this technical Mesopotamic divination on the art of biblical prophecy? How do you think?
I don't know if direct influence. Well, prophecy can be considered a form of divination to some extent. For example, when we have in the book of Samuel, Saul losing his donkeys and going to inquire the prophet about them. It's a kind of divinatory assistance. We don't know how it works, but seems to be something like that. There is, of course, there are similar connections between Mesopotamian prophecy and biblical prophecy. Whether there are connections between Mesopotamian divination and biblical prophecy, I don't have anything that comes to my mind right now, but maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because in biblical prophecy we have a lot of prothesis and apotheosis structure. Yeah, if lion rose in the city, then this and this. So it kind of formally there is something which reminds divination itself. Yeah. Okay. More questions, comments? Yes, please.
So they had very complex mathematics, especially by the Achaemenid period. They could predict the rotations of the planets, and exactly they were practically almost doing calculus even to predict the paths of the planets, and they knew what days there were possible eclipses and what days there couldn't be. And so my question is, if you know that 2 + 2 = 4, and if you say if 2 + 2 = 4, then this happens, then how did it affect their prophecy when they already knew what the outcome was supposed to be?
Yeah, well, with eclipses, they really couldn't know because of they knew there could be an eclipse on that date in 531 BCE, but it didn't happen. So it happened, but they couldn't know it did. It was on the other side of the globe.
But does it affect any way of your thinking if you know if you know what it possibly can be and it's no longer just spontaneous?
Well, yeah, it's a good question because whatever they knew they couldn't see an eclipse on day 10 or day 20 of the month. That they most likely knew, and still they wrote it down. It's interesting to think what went through their minds when they did it. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. More questions? Then just one last question from me. I think for larger context, it would be interesting to ask how Mesopotamian prophecy or divination is connected to late antiquity prophecy and divination. So apparently, Mesopotamian culture collapsed something like in the 1st century CE, but then we have very rich, not prophetic, rather magic or divination tradition in late antiquity. How would you kind of evaluate this connection?
Don't know much about it, so yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, everyone. We have some refreshment outside of the room, so please join us. Thank you for coming.